She said she would never fall in love with a driver, until the day everything changed. Elena Vasquez had built her entire life on certainty. Certainty that hard work mattered more than luck, that status reflected sacrifice, and most of all, that emotions were dangerous liabilities. At 32, she was the youngest senior partner in one of the most prestigious corporate law firms in the city. She wore tailored suits like armor, spoke in calm, precise sentences, and treated vulnerability the way surgeons treat infection. Something to cut away before it spread. Love, in her opinion, was a distraction for people who could afford to lose. So when her friends teased her about being married to her career, she didn't deny it. Careers didn't betray you. Careers didn't waste your time. Careers didn't wake up one morning and decide they wanted something, or someone, else. That Friday night had been particularly brutal. A 12-hour negotiation had collapsed at the last minute when the opposing counsel decided to reconsider the numbers, which in legal terms meant months of work had just evaporated into nothing. By the time Elena stepped out of the glass tower into the cool evening air, her head throbbed and her shoulders ached with exhaustion. Her driver for the firm had already left for the night. So reluctantly she opened a ride app. She hesitated before pressing confirm, annoyed by the tiny spark of irritation she felt. She hated depending on strangers. Hated small talk. Hated the awkward silence of sitting in the back seat while someone else drove her through streets she knew better than most. The app pinged. Driver arriving, Daniel Reyes, 4.9 stars, black sedan, 2 minutes. Perfect, she muttered dryly. Another chatty extrovert. The car pulled up exactly on time, clean, polished, quiet. Not flashy, not old. Professional. Efficient. She appreciated that. She opened the back door. Good evening, the driver said. His voice stopped her. Come. Warm without being intrusive. The kind of voice that didn't demand attention but earned it anyway. Elena slid into the seat, adjusting her bag beside her. Pinecrest Avenue, she said automatically. Yes, ma'am. No chatter. No attempt at conversation. Just smooth acceleration into traffic. For the first time that day she exhaled. But then she noticed something else. The car didn't smell like artificial pine or cheap air freshener. It smelled faintly of leather and something subtle, sandalwood maybe, clean, comforting, intentional. She glanced up at the rearview mirror. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second. He looked away immediately, professional, focused on the road. But in that brief moment she saw enough to register details. Dark hair, strong jawline, eyes that seemed steady, observant, not flirtatious, not curious, just aware. Strange. Most drivers either ignored her completely or tried too hard to be friendly. This one simply existed, calm, self-contained, composed. 5 minutes passed in silence. Then her phone buzzed with another email from work, marked urgent. Her stomach tightened. She opened it, scanned the contents, and felt a surge of frustration so sharp it almost made her dizzy. Of course, she muttered under her breath. Why wouldn't they wait until after midnight to change everything again? She didn't realize she'd spoken aloud until the driver said gently, "Long day?" She stiffened slightly, instinctively guarded. Something like that. He didn't push. Just nodded once, eyes still on the road. Another minute passed. Then, unexpectedly, he said, "For what it's worth, people who work that hard usually win eventually." Not motivational. Not patronizing. Just a quiet statement. Elena blinked. "You don't even know what I do." "True," he said. "But exhaustion has a universal look." She almost smiled. "Almost. What makes you think I'll win?" she asked, surprising herself. Pause. "Because you don't sound like someone who quits." The words landed deeper than she expected. She looked up again at the mirror, studying him more carefully this time. His hands on the wheel were steady, controlled. No nervous tapping. No restless shifting. "You talk like a coach," she said. A faint smile touched his mouth. Used to be. Used to be. Life changes. Something about the way he said it, calm, final, suggested a story behind it. But he didn't elaborate and she didn't ask. Good, she told herself. Boundaries. The car turned onto her street. As they slowed near her building, she felt an odd flicker of disappointment. Ridiculous. It had been a quiet ride. That was all. He pulled to the curb smoothly. "We're here." Elena reached for her bag, then hesitated. "Thank you," she said, not the automatic polite tone she used with strangers, but something more genuine. He met her eyes in the mirror again just for a second. "You're welcome." She opened the door, stepped out, then leaned back in. "Daniel, right?" "Yes, ma'am." "No need for the ma'am," she said. "Elena." A beat. Good night, Elena. She nodded, closed the door and walked toward her building. Halfway to the entrance, she realized something strange. For the first time all day her headache had eased. The next morning she forgot about him. Work swallowed her whole again. Meetings, calls, documents, deadlines. By evening she was running late for a charity gala her firm insisted she attend. Canceling would be a political mistake, so she rushed home, changed into a sleek black dress and ordered another ride. She didn't even check the driver's name. When the car arrived she stepped outside and froze. Same car. Same driver. Daniel glanced at her through the open window, surprise flickering across his face before professionalism returned. Good evening. Elena blinked. You again? A small smile. Looks like it. She slid into the back seat, heart doing something annoyingly unpredictable. What are the odds? She said. In this city? He replied lightly. Not great. Silence again but not awkward. Familiar. After a moment he asked, big event? Work obligation, she said. Pretending to enjoy small talk with people I already negotiate with during the day. He chuckled softly. It was a warm sound. Genuine. You don't sound excited. I'd rather be home reading case law, she admitted. Then paused. That sounded as boring as it is. Not boring, he said. Just focused. She looked at him in the mirror. You're surprisingly kind for someone who drives strangers around all night. And you're surprisingly honest for someone heading to a formal gala. She laughed. A real laugh, unexpected and bright. Something shifted in the air between them. She noticed it immediately and instinctively pulled back, crossing her arms. Dangerous territory. So, she said coolly, how long have you been driving? About a year. Before that. Another small pause. Other things. He clearly wasn't interested in elaborating. Fine by her. The car stopped outside the Grand Hotel entrance, lights glittering across polished marble. Valets hurried forward. Guests in expensive attire drifted past like living advertisements for luxury. Daniel stepped out and opened her door before she could protest. The gesture was simple. Respectful. Not performative. Elena met his eyes, properly this time face to face. Up close he looked even more composed. Not flashy. Not trying to impress. Just solid. Grounded. You don't look like a driver, she said before she could stop herself. One eyebrow lifted. What does a driver look like? She flushed slightly. That came out wrong. It's okay, he said, not offended. Most people mean it as a compliment. Well, she said, regaining her composure, you should be doing something bigger. His expression didn't change, but something unreadable flickered in his eyes. Maybe I am, he said quietly. Before she could respond, a group of her colleagues called her name from the steps. Elena. Over here. She turned back to him quickly. Thank you again. He nodded. Good luck tonight. She walked toward the entrance, feeling his gaze on her back, steady, calm, impossible to interpret. Inside, the noise of the gala swallowed her immediately. Champagne. Laughter. Negotiations disguised as conversations. But for some reason, her mind kept drifting back to a quiet car, a steady voice, and eyes that seemed to see far more than they revealed. Across town, Daniel sat in his parked car for a moment longer than necessary. Then he exhaled slowly and said to himself, yeah, this is going to be complicated. Because what Elena Vasquez didn't know, what she couldn't possibly imagine, was that Daniel Reyes was not just a driver. And if she ever found out the truth, everything she believed about status, power, and love would be turned upside down. She publicly humiliated the driver. Then discovered who he really was. Elena had perfected the art of emotional compartmentalization. By Monday morning, the memory of the quiet ride and the unexpectedly pleasant conversation had been filed away under irrelevant distractions, a mental folder she relied on to stay productive. Work came first. Always. The firm's conference room buzzed with tension as senior partners debated a high-stakes acquisition that could make or break several careers. Elena stood at the head of the table, presenting projections with her usual precision, her voice calm despite the pressure. Which means if we don't secure the municipal approval within 10 days, the entire deal collapses, she concluded. Silence followed. Then the managing partner nodded slowly. Excellent work, Ms. Vasquez. As always. Praise from him was rare. Elena accepted it with a polite nod, though internally she felt only relief. Winning wasn't about ego, it was about survival in a world where one mistake could undo years of effort. As the meeting adjourned, her colleague Priya fell into step beside her. You're coming to Marcus's birthday tonight, right? Elena sighed. Do I have a choice? Nope. Entire department will be there. Fine, Elena said. 1 hour. Then I disappear. Famous last words. By evening, the rooftop lounge glittered with city lights and expensive cocktails. Music pulsed softly, conversation flowing between groups of lawyers and executives who treated networking like an Olympic sport. Elena arrived late, scanning the crowd automatically, a habit she developed after years of high-pressure environments. Always know the exits. Always know who's watching. Marcus waved her over enthusiastically. You made it. Briefly, she said, handing him a gift bag. You always say that. And I always leave early. Laughter rippled through the group. For a while the evening went smoothly. She answered polite questions, endured light teasing about her workaholic tendencies, and even allowed herself a glass of wine. Then Marcus leaned closer, lowering his voice conspiratorially. Actually, there's someone I want you to meet. Her stomach sank. Marcus? Relax. Not a date. Investor type. Could be useful for the firm. That changed things. Useful was a language she understood. He guided her toward the bar area. Halfway there, Elena stopped dead. Standing near the entrance, speaking quietly with a security staff member, was Daniel. Not in his driver's clothes this time. He wore a simple dark shirt and tailored trousers, understated but unmistakably refined. He looked different, more authoritative, more present, as if he belonged anywhere he chose to stand. Her pulse skipped in annoyance. Why is he here? Before she could decide what to do, Marcus noticed her line of sight. Oh hey, looks like your ride arrived early. My what? Your car. You did order one, right? We usually arrange them in advance. Heat rose to her face. Of course. Someone from the firm must have scheduled transportation. Daniel glanced up at that exact moment. Recognition flashed across his features. Surprise first, then something warmer, softer. He stepped forward slightly. Good evening, Elena. Marcus blinked. Wait, you know each other? She suddenly felt exposed in a way she couldn't explain. Her colleagues' curious gazes pressed in around her. Something defensive snapped into place. Yes, she said coolly. He's driven me before. Driven me. Not Daniel. Not someone she'd shared an unexpectedly human moment with. Just a driver. Daniel's expression didn't change, but his posture stilled almost imperceptibly. Marcus laughed lightly. Small world. Another partner smirked. Well, at least we know Elena gets home safely. A few people chuckled. Elena forced a polite smile, though discomfort prickled under her skin. She didn't like the tone, not quite mocking but not respectful either. She turned back to Daniel. I'll be leaving shortly. Of course, he said quietly. His voice was exactly the same as before, calm, composed, unfazed, which somehow made her irritation worse. Marcus leaned closer, whispering, You don't have to rush. He can wait. I don't keep people waiting, she replied automatically. Daniel heard that. Something flickered in his eyes, not offense, not embarrassment. Something else. Something thoughtful. But before he could respond, one of the younger associates joked loudly, Hey man, you ever get tired of chauffeuring all these high-powered lawyers? The air tightened instantly. Elena's jaw clenched. That was inappropriate. Daniel answered calmly. I meet interesting people. Bet you hear a lot of secrets, the associate pushed, clearly emboldened by alcohol. Confidentiality is part of the job. The associate snorted. Guess everyone's got to start somewhere. A few uncomfortable laughs followed. Elena felt heat crawl up her neck, anger this time though she wasn't sure at whom. The associate for being rude or herself for standing there saying nothing. Daniel didn't react. Not defensively. Not submissively. Just steady. And somehow that quiet dignity made the situation feel worse. She cleared her throat. That's enough. Her voice cut cleanly through the chatter. The group fell silent. But instead of addressing the associate, she turned to Daniel, her tone formal, distant. Please wait outside. The words sounded harsher out loud than they had in her head. A flicker of surprise crossed Marcus's face. Daniel studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded once. Of course. He stepped back, turned, and walked toward the exit without another word. Something twisted uncomfortably in her chest as the door closed behind him. Priya leaned in immediately. Okay, that was tense. Elena lifted her chin. Professional boundaries. Marcus looked uncertain. He seemed nice. He's a service provider, she said crisply. Not a guest. The words tasted sour, but she pushed the feeling down. This is appropriate. This is correct. This is how things work. Yet for the rest of the evening, she couldn't shake the image of his calm expression as he left. Not hurt, not angry. Just disappointed. 20 minutes later, she stepped outside into the cool night air. Daniel stood beside the car, hands loosely clasped behind his back, posture relaxed. No impatience. No resentment. Just waiting. Guilt pricked unexpectedly. I didn't mean to, she started, then stopped. Apologizing felt strange. He opened the door for her. You don't need to explain. She hesitated before getting in. They were being rude. I've experienced worse. The simplicity of the statement hit harder than any complaint would have. She slid into the back seat, suddenly unsure where to look. After a moment, she said quietly, "Thank you for waiting." Of course. Silence filled the car as they pulled into traffic. This time it wasn't comfortable. It was heavy. Finally, she said, "You didn't have to come inside. I was asked to check in with the host." By whom? Pause. The event coordinator. That seemed reasonable. Yet something about his tone suggested there was more he wasn't saying. She studied his reflection in the mirror. You don't seem bothered. Should I be? I was blunt. You were protecting your position. The word startled her. That's not. It's understandable, he said gently. Different worlds. Different worlds. The phrase echoed in her mind. Yes, she said after a long moment. Different worlds. The car slowed at a red light. For a brief second, their eyes met in the mirror again. There was no resentment there. Just distance. And that somehow hurt more. When they reached her building, she didn't move immediately. Daniel, she said softly. Yes. I hope I didn't offend you. He considered her carefully before answering. You didn't offend me. Relief flickered, then vanished as he continued. But you did remind me of something. Her stomach tightened. What? That first impressions aren't always accurate. The lightness in his tone didn't match the weight of the words. Before she could respond, he stepped out and opened her door. She stood there awkwardly, searching for something to say, something that would undo the uncomfortable gap that had formed between them. Nothing came. Good night, Elena, he said. Not warm. Not cold. Just final. She watched as he returned to the driver's seat and pulled away, taillights disappearing into the darkness. Upstairs, she paced her apartment, irritation building. Why am I thinking about this? He's a driver. A stranger. This shouldn't matter. Yet it did. Because beneath her carefully constructed logic, something quieter whispered. You didn't treat him the way he deserved. Across the city, Daniel parked in front of a towering glass building, one far more impressive than any rideshare driver should have reason to visit. Security guards straightened immediately as he approached. Good evening, sir. He nodded, walking past them without breaking stride. Inside, an assistant hurried forward. Mr. Reyes, the board is waiting. He loosened his cufflinks slightly, expression calm, composed, powerful. Then let's not keep them waiting. Because Daniel Reyes wasn't just a driver. He was the founder and CEO of one of the fastest-growing transportation companies in the country, a company currently negotiating a massive partnership with Elena Vasquez's firm. And after tonight, everything between them was about to change. The driver walked into the boardroom, and every person who mocked him went silent. Elena arrived at the office earlier than usual the next morning, hoping that work would drown out the nagging unease she'd carried since the night before. The building was quiet, the polished marble floors echoing faintly beneath her heels as she crossed the lobby. Normally she loved this hour, the calm before the storm, the illusion of control. Today it felt hollow. She kept replaying the moment on the rooftop, her own voice, cold and formal, telling him to wait outside, the way he had nodded without protest, the quiet dignity in his departure. Why does this bother me so much? She told herself it didn't, that it couldn't, that it shouldn't. Her assistant hurried over. Good morning, Ms. Vasquez. The partners moved the Meridian meeting to 9. Elena stopped. Moved? That's in 40 minutes. They said it was urgent. Meridian. Her pulse quickened. That was the biggest deal on the firm's calendar. A multi-billion-dollar transportation infrastructure partnership that would put their firm on the map internationally. Who's attending? She asked. The entire executive board, and the client CEO apparently. Elena nodded sharply. Conference room A. Yes, ma'am. As she walked toward the elevators, adrenaline replaced the lingering emotional fog. This was what she did best. Strategy. Negotiation. Control. Whatever discomfort she'd felt last night had no place here. Conference room A was already filling when she arrived. Senior partners murmured in tight clusters. Assistants arranged documents. Screens glowed with financial projections. Marcus waved her over. "Good you're here. This one's huge." "When isn't it?" she replied, taking her seat. He leaned closer. "Apparently the CEO is extremely private. Rarely meets partners directly." "Good," Elena said. "Less theatrics." "Actually," Marcus added, "word is he built the company from nothing. Started as a driver himself." Elena barely registered the comment. Her focus was already shifting into professional mode. Then the managing partner entered, expression unusually tense. "Everyone, please take your seats. Our client will be joining us shortly." The room fell silent. Minutes ticked by. Finally the doors opened. Elena looked up casually and felt the world drop out from under her. Daniel walked in. Not in casual clothes. Not in a driver's uniform. In a perfectly tailored dark suit that fit him like it had been designed for power. His posture was different, not deferential, not neutral, but commanding. Confident. Authoritative. Behind him followed a team of executives and legal advisors. The managing partner stood immediately. "Mr. Reyes, welcome." "Mr. Reyes." The name hit her like a physical blow. Daniel, "No, Mr. Reyes," shook his hand with calm assurance. "Thank you for accommodating the schedule change." His voice was the same, yet not. Colder. Controlled. Professional in a way that left no trace of the warmth she remembered. Every eye in the room tracked him as he moved toward the head of the table. Elena couldn't breathe. He didn't look at her. Not once. Marcus whispered, barely audible, "That's the CEO." She already knew. Because suddenly every detail made terrifying sense. The composure, the confidence, the quiet authority, the way he had never seemed intimidated by anyone. "Oh my God." The managing partner gestured toward an empty chair beside him. "Please." Daniel sat. Then finally his gaze lifted, sweeping the room once, pausing briefly on Elena. No recognition showed in his expression. No warmth. No anger. Just professional neutrality. Which hurt far more than either would have. "Shall we begin?" he said calmly. The presentation started. Charts, projections, timelines. Elena should have been leading this portion. She had prepared for weeks, but her mind struggled to keep up. Every time she spoke, she felt his presence like gravity pulling at her composure. She forced herself to focus. "You are a professional. Act like one." At one point, she finished outlining a legal risk assessment and looked up instinctively. Daniel was watching her. Not critically. Not approvingly. Just studying her. The silence stretched a fraction too long. Then he said, clear and thorough, "Thank you." Her chest tightened unexpectedly. The meeting continued. Questions were asked. Terms debated. Strategies refined. Through it all, Daniel remained calm, decisive, impossible to read. He commanded the room without raising his voice, without posturing, simply by being certain. Elena realized something unsettling. He wasn't pretending to be powerful. He was powerful. After nearly 2 hours, the discussion paused for a short break. Chairs shifted. Conversations broke out in low tones. Elena remained seated, staring at her notes without seeing them. Marcus leaned toward her. "You okay? You look pale." "I'm fine." She wasn't. Across the room, Daniel spoke quietly with his team. Then he excused himself and walked toward the coffee station. Toward her side of the room. Her pulse spiked. He stopped a few feet away, pouring coffee with unhurried precision. For a moment, neither spoke. Then, without looking at her, he said quietly, "Good morning, Ms. Vasquez." Formal. Distant. She swallowed. "Mr. Reyes." The words felt strange on her tongue. Pause. "I hope last night's event was enjoyable," he said. Her stomach twisted. "I didn't realize you would be here today." "Neither did I," he replied calmly. "Until this morning." Finally he met her eyes. There was something there now, not anger, not coldness, something deeper. Controlled emotion. "You presented well," he added. "Thank you." Another silence. She forced herself to say what had been pressing against her conscience all night. "I owe you an apology." His expression didn't change, but his attention sharpened. "For what?" he asked. "You know what?" He studied her for a long moment. Then he said quietly, "You were protecting your position." The exact same words he had used the night before. "I was wrong," she said softly. A flicker of surprise crossed his face, gone almost instantly. Apology accepted, he said. But his tone carried no warmth. No forgiveness. Just closure. Before she could respond, one of the partners approached. Mr. Reyes, we're ready to resume. He nodded. Of course. Then to Elena with professional politeness, Ms. Vasquez. And he walked away. She watched him go, a hollow ache spreading through her chest. The second half of the meeting ended with preliminary agreements and plans for further negotiations. As people gathered their materials, the managing partner beamed. Excellent progress. We look forward to working closely together. Daniel shook his hand. Likewise. He turned to leave with his team. Halfway to the door he paused, then turned back. His gaze settled on the room. Before I go, he said calmly, I'd like to clarify something. Everyone froze. He continued, I built this company from the ground up. For the first 3 years, I personally drove customers every weekend. Murmurs rippled through the room. He glanced briefly at Elena, not unkindly, not accusingly. Simply factual. I believe leadership requires understanding the experience at every level. The room fell completely silent. No one laughed. No one made jokes about drivers. Because suddenly they understood. He wasn't someone who had started as a driver. He was someone who still chose to be one. Daniel nodded once. Good day. Then he left. The door closed behind him. No one spoke for several seconds. Marcus finally exhaled. Well, that was humbling. Another partner muttered, Remind me never to underestimate anyone again. Elena didn't move. Didn't speak. Because the truth had settled over her like a weight she couldn't shake. She hadn't just dismissed a driver. She had dismissed a man who had treated her with more kindness, respect, and understanding than most people in her world ever had. And now he was gone. Not physically, they would work together for months. But whatever fragile, unexpected connection had existed between them, she had broken it. Outside, Daniel stepped into the sunlight, his expression finally shifting. Not angry, not bitter, but quietly sad. Because despite everything, part of him had hoped she would see him as more than his job. And now he knew exactly how wrong he had been. When she lost everything, the only person who didn't turn away was the driver she had once looked down on. The fallout began quietly. At first, Elena assumed the Meridian deal would move forward as planned. The meeting had gone well. Terms were favorable. No visible conflicts. But by midweek, subtle changes started to appear. Emails went unanswered longer than usual. Requests for documents came through intermediaries instead of directly from Daniel's office. Scheduled calls were postponed, not canceled, just delayed. Professional. Polite. Distant. By Friday afternoon, her assistant knocked hesitantly. Ms. Vasquez, the Meridian team requested that future communications go through the managing partner. Elena looked up sharply. Why? They didn't say. A cold weight settled in her stomach. Thank you, she said quietly. After the door closed, she stared at her desk without seeing it. He didn't complain. He didn't retaliate. He didn't embarrass her. He simply removed her. Professional consequences without personal drama. Which somehow hurt far more. Meanwhile, inside the firm, whispers began. Nothing overt. Nothing actionable. Just subtle comments. Strange they reassigned the lead. I heard the CEO requested it personally. Must be politics. Elena kept her expression neutral, refusing to engage. But each rumor chipped away at the armor she had spent years building. Then came the article. It appeared on Monday morning across multiple business outlets. Meridian CEO insists on hands-on legal oversight. Sources cite strategic shift. No names mentioned. No accusations. But the implication was clear. The client wanted tighter control and different representation. Her phone buzzed nonstop with messages from colleagues, competitors, even law school acquaintances fishing for information. She ignored them all. At lunch, Priya cornered her gently. Hey, talk to me. I'm fine. You're not. Elena set her fork down carefully. It's business. Priya studied her. Did something happen between you and Reyes? The name sent a sharp pulse through her chest. No. Priya didn't look convinced. You sure? I don't discuss clients. It was technically true. Priya sighed. You don't have to be strong all the time, you know? Elena forced a faint smile. Yes, I do. That evening she stayed late, buried in paperwork she didn't actually need to finish. Anything to avoid going home to the silence of her apartment. Silence that now felt heavier than usual. Around 10, her assistant had long since left, and the building had grown quiet. Her phone vibrated. Unknown number. She almost ignored it, then answered. Elena speaking. A familiar voice replied, calm and steady. You shouldn't be working this late. Her breath caught. Daniel. For a moment she couldn't speak. How did you? She started, then stopped. Of course he knew. He had access to everything Meridian related. I noticed your badge was still active, he said. Security logs. Professional. Informational. Not personal. I'm finishing some files, she said stiffly. Pause. You don't have to. Her throat tightened unexpectedly. That's not your concern. Another silence, heavier this time. You're right, he said quietly. It isn't. Something in his tone made her chest ache. Before she could respond, he added, but you should go home. Then the line went dead. She stared at the phone, a confusing mix of irritation and something dangerously close to hurt rising in her chest. 2 days later, everything truly unraveled. During a tense partner meeting, the managing partner cleared his throat and said, there's been a complication with Meridian. Every muscle in Elena's body went rigid. They've requested a formal review of all legal risk assessments. That's standard, someone said. Not when they hire an independent consulting firm to do it. Silence fell. They believe certain projections may have been overly optimistic. Elena's pulse thundered. My analysis was accurate, she said firmly. I'm sure it was, the managing partner replied carefully. But perception matters. Until this is resolved, we'll need to reassign your caseload. Reassign. Not temporary leave. Not support. Reassign. The word felt like a punch to the gut. She kept her voice steady. Understood. But inside something cracked. That night, Elena walked home instead of calling a car. She needed air. Space. Distance from the suffocating pressure building inside her chest. Streetlights cast long shadows across the pavement. The city buzzed with life around her, people laughing, talking, living, while she felt strangely detached from it all. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to admit the truth. She was exhausted. Not physically. Emotionally. From always being strong. Always composed. Always perfect. And suddenly, without warning, her vision blurred. She stopped walking. Tears. She hadn't cried in. She couldn't even remember how long. Get it together, she whispered to herself. But the tears came anyway, silent, unstoppable. Then headlights slowed beside her. She stiffened, wiping her face quickly, assuming it was a stranger. The window lowered. Elena. Her heart stopped. Daniel. Of course it was him. Because apparently the universe had a cruel sense of timing. She straightened immediately, anger flashing through the humiliation. I don't need a ride. He didn't argue. Just studied her quietly. You don't have to, he said. But you shouldn't walk alone this late. I said I'm fine. Yes, he replied gently. You always say that. The words hit too close to home. She turned away, arms wrapped tightly around herself. Please just go. A long pause. Then the car door opened. She heard footsteps behind her. Panic flared, not fear of him but fear of being seen like this. Don't, she said hoarsely. Please. He stopped a respectful distance away. Okay. No pressure. No intrusion. Just presence. After a moment he said quietly, I didn't request your reassignment. Her head snapped toward him. What? I asked for additional oversight, not your removal. Confusion surged. Then why? Your firm made that decision. She stared at him, trying to process the information. I would never try to damage your career, he continued. Not for something like that. Something like that. Meaning the rooftop incident. Guilt twisted sharply in her chest. Why are you telling me this? She asked softly. Because you deserve to know. Silence stretched between them, charged with everything unsaid. Finally her voice broke. I worked my whole life for this. I know. I did everything right. I know. And it still wasn't enough. Something in her cracked completely then, the words spilling out before she could stop them. I don't know who I am if I lose this. She hadn't meant to say it. Hadn't meant to reveal that much. But once it was out, she couldn't take it back. Daniel stepped closer, still careful, still giving her space. You're not your job, he said quietly. That's easy for you to say, she shot back. You have everything. He shook his head slowly. I have things. Not everything. Their eyes met. For the first time since the boardroom there was warmth there again, cautious, fragile, but real. You once told me I should be doing something bigger, he said. She flushed. I didn't know who you were. You knew exactly who I was, he replied gently. You just didn't think it was enough. The truth of it stung. Tears spilled again, unstoppable now. I'm sorry, she whispered. Not just for that night. For all of it. He didn't answer immediately. Then softly, I know. And before she could protest, he removed his jacket and draped it around her shoulders. A simple, instinctive gesture. Warm. Solid. Protective. She clutched it without thinking. Come on, he said quietly. Let me take you home. This time she didn't argue. The ride was silent but not tense. Just heavy with emotion. When they reached her building, she hesitated before getting out. Daniel, why are you still being kind to me? He met her eyes, something deep and vulnerable flickering there. Because kindness shouldn't depend on whether someone deserves it. Her throat tightened painfully. I don't deserve it. Maybe not, he said gently. But you needed it. She stepped out slowly, still wrapped in his jacket. For a moment, neither moved. Then she said, barely audible, I was wrong about you. A faint smile touched his lips. A lot of people are. He drove away before she could say anything else. Upstairs, Elena sank onto her couch, clutching the jacket like an anchor. For the first time in years, she didn't open her laptop. Didn't check emails. Didn't plan her next move. She just sat there, breathing, feeling, letting the carefully controlled walls around her heart crumble piece by piece. Because the man she had once dismissed as just a driver, had just shown her more compassion than anyone else in her entire professional world. And deep down, she knew one terrifying truth. She wasn't just losing her career. She was falling in love with the one man she had sworn she would never love. When the truth finally came out, the whole world watched her choose love over pride. The investigation lasted 3 weeks. 3 weeks of silence, speculation, and sleepless nights. Elena continued going to work, but without her usual authority. Files were lighter. Meetings smaller. Conversations cautious. No one said she was being sidelined. They didn't have to. She could feel it. For the first time in her life, she wasn't the unstoppable one. At home, Daniel's jacket remained draped over the back of her couch like a quiet presence she couldn't bring herself to return. Sometimes she caught herself touching the sleeve absent-mindedly, as if grounding herself in the memory of that night. They hadn't spoken since. Not because she didn't want to. Because she didn't know how. Then came the summons. Emergency partner meeting, her assistant said. Conference room A. All senior staff required. Her stomach dropped. This was it. Either exoneration, or termination. She walked into the room with her head high, heart pounding. The entire leadership team was present. Even the firm's founding partner had dialed in via video. And at the far end of the table, Daniel. Not alone this time. Beside him sat 2 members of Meridian's board and a representative from the independent consulting firm. Elena stopped in the doorway for half a second before forcing herself forward. If he was here, this was bigger than she had imagined. The managing partner gestured stiffly. Please sit, Ms. Vasquez. She did. Her hands remained steady in her lap. Years of courtroom composure held firm, even as dread churned inside her. The consultant cleared his throat. After a comprehensive review of the legal assessments and projections, we have concluded that Ms. Vasquez's analysis was not only accurate but conservative. Murmurs rippled around the table. Elena blinked. Conservative? He continued, in fact, the projected risks were understated by approximately 8%. Had her recommendations been fully implemented, Meridian would have faced significantly lower exposure. Shock washed through the room. The managing partner leaned forward. Then why request additional oversight? One of Meridian's board members answered. Because our internal financial team failed to disclose certain variables during the initial review. A heavy silence fell. In other words, the problem had never been Elena's work. It had been their data. The consultant closed his folder. Ms. Vasquez's performance was exemplary. Relief hit her so suddenly she almost felt dizzy. But it was quickly replaced by something else. Anger. Not loud, explosive anger, but a quiet, burning kind. 3 weeks of doubt. Of humiliation. Of isolation. All because someone else had made a mistake. The managing partner turned to her, suddenly all smiles. Well, this is excellent news. We can restore your full responsibilities immediately. Restore. As if they had simply borrowed them. Elena opened her mouth to respond. And Daniel spoke first. Before we proceed, he said calmly, there's another matter. Every eye shifted to him. He rose slowly, hands resting lightly on the table. Not aggressive. Not theatrical. just deliberate. When Ms. Vasquez was removed from the Meridian case, he continued, no one from your firm consulted us. The managing partner stiffened. We believed it was in the client's best interest. Daniel's gaze remained steady. You believed wrong. Silence. He went on, voice still calm but unmistakably firm. Ms. Vasquez demonstrated exceptional insight, integrity, and professionalism throughout our interactions. Removing her not only disrupted the process, it undermined our confidence in your firm's judgment. The words landed like stones. Marcus stared at the table. Priya looked stunned. The senior partner shifted uncomfortably. Daniel wasn't attacking. He was stating facts, and somehow that was worse. Meridian values competence, he said. Not optics. A flush crept up the managing partner's neck. We were trying to protect the firm. And in doing so, Daniel replied quietly, you nearly cost yourselves the contract. A collective intake of breath. Because everyone understood what he was saying. If Elena hadn't been reinstated, Meridian might have walked away entirely. Daniel turned slightly toward her, his expression softening just a fraction. Ms. Vasquez, he said, if you are willing, Meridian would like you to resume your role as lead counsel. For a moment she couldn't speak. Not because of the offer. Because of the way he said it. Respectful. Sincere. Public. He wasn't just restoring her position. He was restoring her reputation. She cleared her throat, forcing her voice steady. I would be honored. A faint smile touched his lips, brief, almost private. Excellent. After the meeting adjourned, people approached her with congratulations, apologies, awkward attempts at normalcy. She responded politely, but her focus was elsewhere. Daniel. He was gathering his documents, preparing to leave. If she let him walk out now, she might never get another chance. Mr. Reyes, she said, stepping forward. He looked up. For a second, the noise of the room seemed to fade away. Yes. Her throat tightened. There were 1,000 things she wanted to say, none of them appropriate for a conference room full of colleagues. May I speak with you privately? Pause. Then he nodded. Of course. They stepped into an empty office overlooking the city. The door closed softly behind them, sealing them in a quiet bubble of sunlight and tension. For a moment, neither spoke. Finally, Elena said, you didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. No, she insisted. You could have stayed silent. Let the firm fix its own mistake. He studied her carefully. Would that have been fair? Fair. The word felt loaded. You don't owe me fairness, she said softly. Something shifted in his expression, pain quickly masked. Maybe not, he said. But I couldn't watch you take the blame for something you didn't do. Emotion surged dangerously close to the surface. After everything, I still don't understand why you care. The question hung between them, fragile and raw. Daniel exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair, the first sign of visible strain she had ever seen from him. Because I never stopped caring, he said quietly. Her breath caught. I tried, he continued. After that night, I told myself it was better this way. Different worlds. Different expectations. Cleaner. But every time I saw you in a meeting, every time someone mentioned your name, he shook his head. It didn't go away. Her eyes stung. I hurt you, she said. Yes. The honesty was gentle, not accusatory, which somehow made it hurt more. I was afraid, she admitted, of being judged, of losing credibility, of looking weak. You weren't weak, he said softly. You were human. A tear slipped down her cheek before she could stop it. And now, he asked quietly. She met his eyes, heart pounding. Now I don't care what anyone thinks. Silence. Heavy. Electric. I thought loving someone like you would make me lose everything, she said. But losing you was worse. His composure cracked just slightly. Hope flickered in his eyes, cautious, fragile. Elena. She stepped closer. I don't care that you're a CEO, she continued. And I don't care that you were a driver. I care that you're kind when no one's watching. That you listen when I didn't deserve it. That you showed up when everyone else stepped back. Her voice trembled, but she didn't stop. I said I would never fall in love with a driver. A shaky laugh escaped her. I was wrong. The words hung in the air like a heartbeat. Daniel stared at her as if afraid to move. You don't have to say anything, she added softly. I just needed you to know. She turned, preparing to leave, dignity intact, confession delivered. His hand closed gently around her wrist. Not forceful. Just enough to stop her. Wait. She turned back. His eyes were bright now, emotion unguarded. "You once told me I should be doing something bigger," he said quietly. She winced. "Please don't." "But you were right," he continued. "Driving wasn't the biggest thing I was doing." A small smile appeared. "The biggest thing was meeting you." Her heart slammed against her ribs. "I fell in love with you long before you knew who I was," he said. "And apparently I never learned how to stop." Tears blurred her vision completely now. "Daniel?" He stepped closer, cupping her face with gentle certainty. "So if you're asking whether I still want this, the answer is yes. Absolutely yes." Relief, joy, disbelief, all of it crashed through her at once. She didn't remember moving. Only that suddenly she was kissing him, years of restraint dissolving into something raw and real and undeniable. For a second he froze, then his arms wrapped around her, holding her as if she might disappear. When they finally pulled back, both were breathless. "People are definitely talking about this," she whispered. "Let them," he said, resting his forehead against hers. "For once I don't care either." She laughed through tears. "Neither do I." Outside the office windows, the city stretched endlessly, noisy, complicated, unpredictable. But inside that quiet room, something simple and powerful had taken root. Respect, humility, kindness, love. And the most satisfying justice of all wasn't revenge, or humiliation, or public defeat. It was this. The woman who believed status defined worth had learned that true value couldn't be measured by titles or appearances. And the man who had been underestimated had proven that greatness often hides behind the simplest roles. Sometimes instant karma doesn't punish the wrongdoers. Sometimes it humbles them, and gives them a chance to become better. Elena rested her head against Daniel's chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. "So," she murmured, "does this mean I still get rides home?" He smiled, pressing a kiss into her hair. "Only if you sit in the front seat." She looked up. "Why?" "Because you're not just a passenger anymore." He took her hand, intertwining their fingers. "You're my partner." And for the first time in her life, Elena Vasquez felt something far stronger than ambition or pride. She felt safe. She felt seen. She felt loved.